Hello and welcome to Historical Trends. I'm Don Frazier and this is Mikayla Johnson. On today's episode, we're going to delve into the terrifying, never-ending pit of despair called the United States national debt.
Yes, Dr. Frazier. The United States' cumulative debt is almost impossible to comprehend. Recently, national debt has soared past $21 trillion.
$21 trillion, that's a lot.
And if we stacked up $100 bills on top of each other, $1 trillion will reach approximately 9 times the altitude that a commercial airplane flies.
So when I'm cruising at 40,000 feet, there's still a stack of
Yeah.
dollars going north.
And that's just $1 trillion.
Yikes.
$21 trillion will reach the moon.
That's a hard way to do space travel.
Despite this huge amount, many Americans today do not think about how this is going to affect them personally and what this is going to look like for our future generations. Many wonder if national debt is really that big of an issue since most countries have at least some type of debt.
Oh, sure. We should start off this discussion, however, by defining debt.
Okay. Debt is the total amount of our outstanding liabilities. I think it's important to differentiate between debt and deficit because many people use these interchangeably, but that just isn't correct. Deficit is what happens when government spending exceeds incoming revenue, whereas debt is when the deficits continue to build up. It can be illustrated that deficit is the shovel and debt is the hole. Okay. Each fiscal year that the United States has a budget deficit, the hole gets deeper and deeper.
You should quit digging. Now that we have an understanding of what debt is, let's get into the history behind ours.
National debt has been a hot topic since the beginning of our country. Alexander Hamilton was a lot more than a star of a popular musical. He was the first United States Secretary of the Treasury, and he was an advocate for the first national bank, and he wanted to make a clear way for the new nation to take control of their expenses. The bank would stabilize the nation's credit and develop a way to manage financial matters. And Hamilton was the first to realize that the national debt is too vast of an issue to push aside. But before we get more into this history, let's take a quick break.
Okay.
Bear Leader Tours. Where will Bear Leader Tours take you? Everywhere. Paris. Bruges. Trieste. Battlefields. Pearl Harbor. Pacific beaches. New Orleans. Join the adventure. www.mcwhinney.org.
And we're back. All right. Now let's look into the history of the national debt behind the history of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, fighting the Revolutionary War, Alexander Hamilton grew very close to George Washington.
They were pals.
Yeah, and gaining the trust of the soon-to-be first president of the United States was very advantageous for Hamilton because it allowed an unwanted orphan to become the United States' first Secretary of the Treasury. And this is a very important role because he was able to have a say in the new country's financial issues, which was greatly needed because after the Revolutionary War, the new country was faced with a dilemma.
A dilemma. All right, so we know that wars are expensive, especially for a new country, without any sort of basis, and especially a new country gaining its independence from a world power like Great Britain.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. The United States was actually born in debt. America was in a dire need of a financial funding system, and Alexander saw that the United States owed $11 million
So you and him are close.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew.
Oh, Alex. He thought that would be important.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Well, he saw that we owed $11 million to foreign investors and a whopping $42 million to domestic investors. And this is not even accounting for the individual debt these states accumulated.
So each of the individual colonies racked up debt in addition to the national government.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yes.
That's a lot of debt.
Yeah.
Piled on top of debt. It's like a debt layer cake.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
The new country had no power to tax because of the Articles of Confederation.
Yeah, that's a little limiting form of government.
Yeah. The nation was in fear of a strong central power, so they created a very weak federal government. Yeah. And under the Articles of Confederation, the federal government had no power to tax.
Zero.
The individual states had no power to coin.
None.
and no power to regulate commerce.
Not even a bit.
And this is a problem because taxation is one of the most important ways a country gains revenue, and revenue which is used to help society grow.
Okay.
Hence, Hamilton proposed an idea of a national bank, which would allow the government a way to tax goods such as whiskey.
Whiskey. Don't tax my whiskey. All right. So this no doubt created an uproar with the new whiskey-swilling Americans.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Hamilton's plan for a national bank was wildly unpopular to the new Americans because they had just won their independence from Britain, who we all know was accused of unfair taxation.
Sure.
Therefore, it's easy to say that Hamilton's idea did not go over well. But the new government held their ground, even squashing an uprising called the Whiskey Rebellion.
Mikayla, do you know what that whole whiskey thing was about?
Not really.
All right. Well, these guys are growing corn, but corn is tough to transport when it's still corn.
Mm-hmm.
So they're distilling it into whiskey, so it's easier to transport. And they can put it on boats and send it down to New Orleans. And so they felt like this was an unfair burden on their particular industry. So, hence, Whiskey Rebellion.
Okay. The Whiskey Rebellion was a protest against the first tax imposed on domestic products in the United States.
That's it.
And farmers were used to distilling their own whiskey and using it as a medium of exchange.
That's it. I mean, so whiskey's money.
Yeah. So the tax was very upsetting to them. And they resisted because of the principles they fought for in the Revolutionary War. Tax without representation. And the protest escalated quickly into an armed attack of a tax inspector, becoming so violent that Washington himself rode alongside with 13,000 militiamen to scare away the rebels. Well, the government held their ground, and the economy continued to grow while national debt decreased.
And the farmers in southwestern Pennsylvania were sad.
Yes.
All right. So what made that particular change into such a huge problem that we have today? I mean, so we have a way of finally taxing, but now we have a massive debt.
Mm-hmm.
So unravel that for us.
Well, a little thing called World War II happened.
That's a pretty expensive thing that happened, yes.
Yes. And due to borrowing, national debt was recorded at an all-time high of 113% of GDP in 1946.
113%
Yeah.
of GDP, that's a lot. We owed more money to creditors than the country produced in a year.
Yes, exactly. And what distinguishes World War II from events prior to that was that the government didn't try to pay off debt. So we are still paying for it today.
So just rolled it forward.
Yeah. Another event that contributes to national debt is the New Deal proposed by Franklin D. Roosevelt during the Great Depression. The series of programs and projects were created aimed to restore economic prosperity, guarantee a minimum standard of living, and create jobs for those who were hit the hardest. Some of the most important programs was the Social Security Act, the Works Progress Administration, and the Civilian Conservation Corps.
All right, so gone are the days of laissez-faire economics, and hello to massive government intervention.
Yes.
Okay.
The New Deal was a pivotal moment in our history because it completely changed the way our federal government's relationship is to our citizens.
Yeah.
Another event that shaped the United States' national debt of what we see today is the recent financial crisis of 2008. And what started as a crash of the subprime mortgage market developed into an international economic recession. And the impact of the crisis was that $5 trillion of pensions, 401ks, and real estate value was completely wiped off the system.
Yeah.
Millions of people were out of their homes and jobs. A decade later, the housing market is still now just recovering.
Wow. Yeah, that hits me.
Yeah.
All right. While there are many other events that have shaped the U.S. national debt, and certainly current events counts, let us discuss possible outcomes of our immense debt rolling forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the Congressional Budget Office predicts that debt is going to double by 2028, which is insane to think about. Within our lifetime, that debt is going to be so high that there is not going to be enough money in America's economy to keep everything the same.
Nope.
Something is going to have to change. And this leads us to a huge aspect of our debt, entitlements. And if you look at the national debt clock, we see gray numbers. And these amounts are pensions or entitlements, such as Social Security, which is the largest United States government program,
Everybody participates.
welfare, and Medicare. This means that people have been paying into these programs every single paycheck. Therefore, they are entitled to their money. But there's a big possibility that we will not have enough money to pay those people.
Yeah, those people are me. and other people that are born during the baby boom or just afterwards. We're all creeping towards retirement age. So, is there going to be enough money to pay for all of us retirees while keeping all other national expenditures the same?
Mm-hmm.
How should we fix it?
Well, that's a very interesting question because there are so many different suggestions on how we can combat national debt, such as raise taxes or cut government spending. The largest budget expenditures in our country is Medicare, Social Security, and national defense. How we believe the government should change the budget can define where we are politically.
Sure.
For example, Republicans strongly believe in a powerful national defense.
Yeah.
Therefore, they're willing to pay a hefty price tag in order to keep our defense one of the best in the world.
Airplanes and tanks are expensive.
Yes. Democrats, on the other hand, believe in social and economic equality, so keeping social programs intact is very important to them. However we identify politically, it is up to us to decide. That is what our country is founded on, democracy, meaning we all get a say. And by voting, we can decide who is in office, thus our opinion on important issues on how our government spends our money is heard.
Okay.
But this leads to yet another problem. Congress has implemented an idea called debt ceiling.
The debt ceiling.
And this is a limit on how much the government can spend over budget.
Okay.
However, congressmen continue to pass bills and constantly raise the ceiling,
Raising the ceiling.
thus defeating its purpose.
I mean, why have a ceiling if you keep raising
Yeah.
the ceiling? All right, so year after year, the debt ceiling that is in place to slow down the growth of our national debt gets bumped up.
Yes.
All right, so I guess this just is a way for congressmen to say we're addressing national debt without addressing the
without
national
doing
debt.
anything.
Okay.
Yeah, and if we don't do anything, national debt can become such a problem that is irreversible,
Yikes.
which will have lasting consequences for our future generations.
Yeah, especially you guys.
Yeah.
Because I'll be old and retired and,
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
creeping towards oblivion. All right. The recent debt crisis in Greece kind of comes to mind of what happens when national debt gets completely out of control.
Yes. Since the 1990s, the Greek government has been reporting lower deficits and debts than they actually had.
So they were fudging the numbers.
Yes.
Okay.
And when it finally came out that those reports had been false and that the budget deficit of that year was actually almost 14% of economic output, investors started asking for higher interest rates. And these higher interest rates caused the government to be unable to make necessary payments, making it necessary to take out more loans, resulting in a vicious cycle.
Wow.
And this caused the economy to drastically shrink, which led to many problems. A study by Dionysus think tank, which is a
Say that 3 times
Yeah.
fast. Dionysus.
Dionysus, which is a nonprofit research institute, recorded that 15% of the population lived under extreme poverty threshold, and that the unemployment rate hit a remarkable 22%. The Bank of Greece found that the net worth of the households of Greece fell by a whopping 40%.
Wow. So let me get this straight.
Yeah.
So you have a customer, Greece, borrowing money from creditors, and they are proving to be so slipshod with their own accounting that everybody says, we don't trust you anymore. We're going to charge you more for the money we loan you. Okay. And so then that creates an even bigger spiral of doom.
Yeah.
All right. So pretty much a horror story. So this crisis is comparable to the Great Depression here. I'm not saying debt will definitely affect America in the same way, but it shows that national debt does affect people, and if we're not careful, we can go through something similar to this as well.
Yes.
Fair enough?
Yeah. And while countries cannot just demand their money back, lenders may begin to lose confidence in our economy and demand higher interest rates, which could potentially trigger a financial crisis.
Here in the States.
Yeah.
But also around the world.
The world economy relies heavily on the well-being of the United States. One of our top foreign investors is Japan, who owns almost $1.4 trillion of U.S. debt, which equates to about 20% of Japan's economic output. If our economy breaks, this would rock Japan's economy considerably. This shows that the United States debt is more than just a national issue. If our economy falls, it can mean that a worldwide economic crisis would happen.
Okay. So this has been very thought-provoking, and we will continue with discussion questions after this break.
Okay.
When you support McWhinney History Education Group, you also support the many young workers who operate and maintain the company's digital operations. These are dedicated university students who handle many things such as filming, recording, and editing content for McWhinney, as well as cultivate the layout and structure of McWhinney's various websites, including its associated channel on YouTube. We are a nonprofit organization that exists from donations from interested persons and history enthusiasts alike. Donations enable our students to obtain a higher education, job training, and career bolstering skills. If you would like to donate, please visit us at www.mcwhinney.org and click on our About Us tab to learn more.
And we're back. So now that we've talked about national debt and how it's a looming sword of Damocles
Yes.
over our heads, let's talk a little bit about possible solutions.
Okay.
For instance, one of the questions that always comes up is, why don't we just print more money?
And while that is a very popular suggestion,
Yeah, who doesn't like printing money?
Yeah,
Smell the ink, smell the paper. Chugum, chugum, chugum.
printing money actually leads to more problems. The example of Zimbabwe shows the consequences of printing too much money to get out of financial situations.
Yeah, Zimbabwe is a dumpster fire. Yes.
Well, the government decided to increase the printing of money
So they're just cranking out money.
Yeah, to finance the Second Congo War.
Okay.
And this short-term solution caused unbelievably high inflation.
Printing more money causes inflation.
Yeah.
What kind of inflation are we talking about?
Well, at its peak, inflation was estimated to be almost 80%, 80 billion percent. Not just
80% or
Yeah.
80 billion percent?
80
Big difference, man.
Yeah.
Carry
80
the B
billion
off the
percent.
mot. Okay, so that would mean that people were probably unable to afford even the basic goods.
Yes, for sure. A loaf of bread could have cost as high as 10 million Zimbabwe dollars. Therefore, printing money doesn't affect output in any way. It just causes inflation.
So not a good outcome.
Yeah, no, don't do it.
So how much has our public debt increased in recent years? I mean, what's the growth rate?
Okay.
Are we on a gradual slope or are we on a spike?
Okay, yes. Well, our public debt has skyrocketed and it will continue to rise. Public debt has increased approximately by $500 billion each year since 2003. During Trump's first year in office,
Yes.
public debt has increased by $1 trillion. And as if we don't already go over budget, President Trump signed a debt suspension.
A debt suspension instead of a debt ceiling.
Yes, which will allow unlimited amount of borrowing till March 1st of next year. However, the deficit is at a point to where it doesn't matter who is in office. The debt will continue to rise because of interest. Say interest is increased by 1%. 1% of $21 trillion is $210 billion. $210 billion is added to national debt with every 1% increase.
Gadzooks.
Yeah. So as interest rates
yes.
increase by just a couple percentage points, the U.S. has to pay bondholders huge amounts of money, which is taken from tax revenue.
Hang on. But I'm a bondholder, so I'm just borrowing. The government's borrowing from me to pay the debts, and I'm the creditor. So really the government owes me money.
Yeah.
Maybe I should get a tax rebate.
Yeah,
All right,
maybe.
so why does the government continue to borrow when it knows it's just going to lead to more accumulated debt?
Okay. Well, the government borrows for many different reasons.
Okay.
One reason is because rather than cutting back on government spending, authorities often decide to borrow when tax revenue is less than what they expected.
Okay.
And this allows the government to maintain wages and continue to pay for prior commitments such as Social Security and interest. Another reason...
And the World War II tanks,
yes,
so we're still paying.
yes, we have
on
to pay for that.
Okay. Well, those Shermans were expensive.
Yeah.
They burned fast, too. Anyhow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they
Okay.
just did. They got wrecked easily.
Yeah.
It's a true fact.
And another reason why our government continues to borrow is because of political reasons.
Okay. So in democracies, citizens often vote people into office thinking that their voice is going to be heard and their views represented. Sometimes they also vote for candidates because they're going to give them free stuff. Bernie Sanders. Anyhow. Thus, pressure from constituents to keep promises of things like lower tax rates and also the current level of increased government spending causes Congress to have to borrow.
Yes.
Because we're giving you your money back with a tax reduction, but then we're taking it back from you again because you want the free stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so it's a vicious cycle.
And then another reason why we borrow is because it leads to economic growth.
Okay.
During recessions, government revenue and public spending decrease. By borrowing, the government injects money into circulation, which acts as a jumpstart to the economy.
Okay, so it kind of backstops
Yeah.
some things that are grinding to a halt. So how much is the interest right now?
Well, currently, the net interest on debt is almost $350 billion.
Yeah, you'd mentioned that.
Yeah. U.S. interest is already the fastest growing government expense and is estimated to be $390 billion for the next year.
Dang.
And this is very staggering to think about because on interest alone, the United States has spent more than half of what they spent on keeping our nation safe, which includes all branches of the military.
Whew.
Interest is growing so much so that the government could potentially spend more on interest than it does on national defense spending.
Good night.
And according to the Congressional Budget Office, interest is expected to triple within the next decade.
Wow.
Yeah.
So essentially, we'll just be paying our taxes to pay the debt service.
That's what's going to happen.
That's crazy. That just goes to show how dangerous national debt can be and is getting. It is a big issue that needs to be fixed. Okay. We're going to get into some viewer questions right after this break.
History has become one of the most fought-over battlegrounds in terms of shifting people's views and opinions about their country. In response to this, we have decided to launch a website called Go To History that will become your home for clear-eyed history content. Our objective is to put history out there, free of agendas, and allow you, the viewers, to decide what you believe and decide how to interpret this information. With experienced professors such as Dr. Don Frazier and Dr. Stephen Hardin teaching courses and creating agenda-free content for students and just plain history enthusiasts, the content of Go To History is vastly informative and unbiased.
History people, it's Phil Collins here. I am just giving a shout out to a couple of guys that you're going to be hearing from. And they're good friends of mine, but they're also incredibly knowledgeable historians. Dr. Donald Frazier and Dr. Stephen Hardin. Both great friends of mine, both helped me out with my book on the Alamo. And two guys, if you don't know much about history, these are the first two guys you should go to. Okay, what they don't know isn't worth knowing. Don Frazier, Steve Hardin, I hope you enjoy their presentations.
My name is Evan Williams, a history major at McMurray University, and I love the layout of the Go To website. I mean, it is singularly built from the ground up with user convenience in mind. Every study available is within a single Courses tab, with each lesson having a single page for each of its individual videos, text, visuals, and quizzes, all at easy grasp. This is most definitely history made simple.
Please log on to www.gotohistory.com.
And we're back with the pop of a shoulder. So, these are all questions from viewers.
Okay.
And our viewers are interested in how we get out of this dead hole. But this particular one, Socialist97 asked, why don't we just strip mine rich people and just take all of their stuff and throw that into the hole, and that'll fill the hole and everybody go skipping down the road, except for the newly impoverished rich people.
Yeah. Well, this is a very interesting topic. When people debate this issue, they usually bring up at one point the top marginal rate was a staggering 94% during Eisenhower's term.
Wow. So in the 50s,
Yeah.
you had a 94+% tax rate.
Mm-hmm. They were taking all their money.
They're just taking all the rich people's money.
Yeah.
Well, there was a big disincentive to be rich then, wasn't there? Huh.
And this is more than double than what the top 1% pays now. But what most people don't realize is how much the rich actually pay.
Okay.
The facts may prove to be quite shocking to you. The top 1% pays 40% of all income taxes. 40% of all income tax revenue is paid by 1% of the United States population.
Well, that's not the kind of way it plays out on TV.
No.
No, we want to throw protests, and we want to jump up and down on police cars and say, man, the 2%, they're just hosing us all. All right.
And therefore, it seems that the rich are already paying their fair share. And if not, how much more would be fair? And even if we tax the rich 100%, there would not be enough to pay for Medicare for even 3 years.
And then where would you go?
Yeah.
Because all the rich people would be used up. Huh. And probably living in some other country.
Yeah.
Like Switzerland, the world's largest gated community. All right, sorry.
And our public debt is so large that there is simply not enough rich people to tax to balance the budget.
Wow.
And also, in most cases, the rich are also the producers.
Yeah.
They are the ones who own the huge corporations. Therefore, increasing taxes for the wealthy would discourage work and job creation. And it's not just the rich who would suffer, but also the workers who are not hired, the workers who are laid off, and the customers who have to pay higher prices because of the increase.
So a trickle-down disaster
Yeah.
is what we're talking about.
Therefore, increasing the tax rate for the rich may have drastic effects for the average American.
Even though we're not rich.
Yeah, it would definitely affect us still.
Yikes. All right. So this next one comes in from @Michelle Alexandria. Oh, that's a long handle. From Instagram. Anyhow, she asked, I'm assuming it's a she, maybe she identifies as a she, would going back to the gold standard actually help national debt?
No.
Short answer. Good. Well, we'll move on
Yeah.
then. No. All right, you got to unpack that because
Okay.
it seems like, the gold standard is always the question that comes up. We left the gold standard, I think, during the Nixon administration. And a lot of people say, well, if we just went back to the gold standard, everything would be great.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to discuss why we got rid of it in the first place.
All right, unpack that then.
Okay, so the United States eliminated the gold standard to combat the effects of the Great Depression.
Okay.
Unemployment was at an all-time high, and deflation was spiraling out of control.
Well, what is the gold standard? I mean, perhaps we need to explain that.
The gold standard is when they have gold reserves and
Yes.
they put a fixed value on it, and
Okay. So the currency is actually backed with gold.
gold.
All right. So we essentially started printing fiat money that was not backed by gold. I mean, what's the reserve now to currency? Like in the low teens or even lower? Okay. Sorry.
And so since this was spiraling, the Great Depression was spiraling out of control, the government found that there was basically nothing they could do to stimulate the economy.
Okay.
The gold standard was impractical because the government had no way to increase the amount of money in circulation.
Or the amount of gold they could get their mitts on. I
Yeah.
mean, they drug it out of even private holders of gold because, of course, when you have a financial crisis, everybody goes to gold because gold is worth gold.
Yeah.
All right. So, good money is forced out and bad money is forced in. So the government actually went and seized people's private gold holdings and paid them off with, cash. But yikes. I mean, that was how drastic things were.
Yeah. Unlike what the Fed is responsible for today, the gold standard set a fixed value on money, which didn't work well in economic fluctuations.
Because it doesn't give you much flexibility. Okay.
Yeah. So also, gold is extremely unreliable. If mining stalled, the economy couldn't grow. And if the economy grows faster than the gold is supplied, the Fed cannot put more money into circulation, which would lead just to higher and higher prices.
Okay.
And therefore, if the United States were to go back to the gold standard, the government would have no power to fight for recessions or smother inflation, which would lead to further overspending and inflation.
That's a very sophisticated answer. So all that glitters is not gold.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. So this one is from @GreenChiliDouble. Whataburger fan. All right. Ask, why can't we simply just cancel the debt? It's not just the states that have debt. Other countries owe us as well. So why can't we just agree to settle the problem?
Well, that does sound nice and simple, but...
So does Whataburger.
Yeah, but it just doesn't work that way. It's a more complicated issue. We cannot just simply cancel debt because running deficit is how our government injects potential growth in our economy. And it's by selling bonds to cover deficits in order to...
Wasn't this sort of like how an entrepreneur borrows money in order to start a business?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the government's essentially borrowing money to stimulate different segments of the
Yeah.
economy? Okay.
Yeah, therefore our economy is flooded by public investors, and if we cancel debt, those investors would be gone. The Federal Reserve would lose a vital monetary tool that is used to stabilize the economy.
Okay.
And also the bonds and treasuries that are bought, it is assumed that one day is going to be redeemed with interest.
Yeah, that's what I did. I mean, I had somebody gave me a $25 savings bond as a wedding present, and the other day we were cleaning out some papers and said, wonder what it's worth now. Went over to the bank, $207.
Yeah.
So I was floating the government for a while, about 31 years. So.
So if we decide to just cancel debt, the public sector would lose out on their
Yeah, all
their
the money
promised investment.
that government owes me.
Yeah.
Yes, hey, if you just canceled it all, bonds are worthless.
Yeah. So we would be breaking a legal contract, and in which, in worst case scenario, it could lead to a global issue such as a war. So it is
especially if
extremely
you're
unwise.
Canceling debt
Yeah.
between nations.
It's just not wise to default on our agreements like that.
Yeah. Probably not. So, Colin Kirkpatrick, I'm not sure where this came from, but anyhow, he's asking this question. President Trump signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act in 2017. How is the tax reform going to affect the national debt? I mean, everybody's talking about cut our taxes, got more revenue coming into my family, but what's this going to do to the debt?
Okay. Well, the Tax Cuts and Job Act is one of the biggest tax reforms since the Reform Act in 1983. 86. Not
86.
80, yeah.
Okay.
So the act reduces individual and business tax rates dramatically. And under the tax, the corporate tax was cut, I think, was from 35% to 21%.
Okay.
And all the income brackets were cut as well.
Okay.
So under Trump's administration, he said that it was about creating jobs, growing paychecks, and bringing a fairer taxes to American families. And while that sounds nice, the CBO estimates that the act will add almost $2.3 trillion of national debt. And the act was passed with the expectation of stimulating the economy.
Okay.
However, experts find that while the act may stimulate the economy in the short run, in the long run, the TCJA will have negative effects on our future generations.
So they're just kicking the can down the road.
Yeah.
Okay.
In today's polarized environments, there's no shortage of opinions on this act, obviously. But since we are talking simply on the impact on national debt and not our political views, the tax reform is not the greatest for combating our national debt.
Great.
Since the tax cut will significantly lower U.S. revenues, which is needed to combat fiscal shortfalls. So it's going to add on the debt.
Great. So it's just piling on, but maybe later on.
Yeah.
All right. So this last and final and concluding question is from Karen Miller, who comes to us from Facebook. She asked, should I be worried?
Well, Karen, yes. A lot of people think that national debt is not a problem, and we shouldn't have to worry about it because it's just going to be further down the line. But I would say that's what politicians and those in authority want you to believe.
Sure.
According to the Committee for Responsible Federal Government, national debt is rising unsustainably. The committee said that soon debt will exceed our economy. And that is predicting that debt will grow by nearly $15 trillion and be 101% of our GDP by 2028. And this is within 5 percentage points from an all-time record set in World War II. And this is very alarming because the percentage is extremely high for that of a peacetime level of debt. Like we're not in war.
Are we really in a peacetime level of debt? I mean, we're kind of in the never-ending war.
That's very true.
I mean, the Cold War comes to mind. I mean, one of the ways that we actually won the Cold War was by outspending the Russians.
Yeah.
So while that's not really a shooting and killing war, I don't think we have ever ceased to be on a war footing since 1945. My opinion.
Okay. And if our debt continues to rise at these levels, productive investment will likely be crowded out, wages will be stagnant, and the likelihood of a fiscal crisis will increase immensely. And the reasons why we are able to have so much debt is because our economy was so strong.
Sure.
However, experts predict that it's not going to be the case in our new future. Like, that's not going to be the case.
Right.
This means that we will not be able to continue on this path for much longer. Something is going to have to change.
So it's not just the U.S. that's in this dire predicament.
Yeah.
I mean, all major economies are dealing with something similar.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that we all live may be completely changed.
Yeah. Yeah, there may be a total reconstruction on how our government works, and actually the governments across the world work. And
Prison planet.
yeah, but we're just going to have to see. Hopefully we can be able to fix this issue before it gets too bad.
Before it gets too bad.
Well, worse.
Yeah, I was about to say, I think the way talking to you is really bringing me down.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. Couldn't you have had a
I don't know.
your conversation? All right. So that's all we have for today. Thank you, Mikayla, for joining us. And a big thank you to our viewers and the folks that responded. And tune in next week, and we'll have a completely different topic on historical trends. Thanks for watching.